Oh my god, how have I not done this before? Let's look at the critical literature around my favorite book, Moby Dick, and we'll go from least radical to most radical, and the last one, mwah. First, Moby Dick is a very visual book, and so in Herman Melville's picture gallery, they collect all of the paintings and pieces of art that he talks about in his book and that he describes. A companion to this is another great book, which is around here and I can't put my hands on, is Unpainted to the Last, and it goes over all of the graphic novel and illustrated versions of Moby Dick, including the first great one, Rockwell Kent. So Unpainted to the Last is a really cool book. Then the trying out of Moby Dick is sometimes called the definitive background material. It really talks through where Melville was coming from, what was happening in America at the time, where the chapters and ideas came from. It's maybe the first best book to read after you read Moby Dick. Then we have Cook's Inscrutable Malice, which is one of Melville's lines about God. And so this is very much about the theology, the dark theology behind Moby Dick. So this is a much thicker book, but really wonderful. I have this one is filled with notes. I think it's a really great background piece if you're interested still of the spirituality of what's happening in Moby Dick. And then there's this crazy book, That Lonely Game, Melville, Marty, and the Almanac. Even though this is actually about Marty, it goes over how Melville used the stars, astrology, and the occult throughout his works. And it's just a crazy book with lots of cool illustrations. And these notes are actually from how I'm using this in my Canvanoid graphic novels to explain the hunt for the whale, like the hunt for THC's structure. So this isn't technically the critical literature, but it's amazing. You know the 1950s version of Moby Dick with Gregory Peck? It's really great. It's definitely worth watching. Do you know who wrote that screenplay? Ray Bradbury, the great science fiction author. And he did it with John Huston, the director. And John Huston is a Captain Ahab figure. He was this larger-than-life drunk who's an amazing filmmaker. And this is them in Ireland where they did the filming. And so this is Ray Bradbury talking about what it's like to work with a Captain Ahab-type director directing Moby Dick. It's called Green Shadows, White Whales. So it's great if you like Moby Dick or Ireland or the craziness behind filmmaking. And this is the piece de resistance. Mariners, Renegades, and Castaways by C.L.R. James. Even if you haven't read Moby Dick, you could read this and get so much out of it. It's not a big book. It's like 150 pages. C.L.R. James, this is how I discovered him, but he is one of the great Marxist thinkers of the last century. He was one of the founders of the Pan-African movement. Great political thinker from Trinidad, and he writes about how America is summarized in this book. This racist group heading out to turn these beautiful animals into money and blood. And it is a chilling indictment of what the United States is, where it came from, where it's going, colonialism into imperialism. C.L.R. James is such a brilliant thinker, and this is probably the most important political work about Moby Dick, and one of the most important books I've ever read.